Today I want to dive deep into the idea of how Guild Wars 3 will be a revolutionary game. Now, at the start of any discussion related to any idea about this is entirely speculation about the future of Guild Wars 3, and we will see more and more about this as more news drops, but we won't ever truly know until the game itself launches. But nevertheless, this is a massive topic with many large ideas to talk about, so let's dive into it. First, let's talk about ArenaNet as a studio and their history of making products that push the MMO genre forward. This can be seen both with Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, but in my personal experience as someone who was 5 when the original Guild Wars released, I can only truly talk about Guild Wars 2 from a personal experience point of view. But still, Guild Wars is to this day still considered a timeless and phenomenal game, which is only ever supported by the fact that it is still getting content updates and general changes to this day, alongside with so many people playing the game. As Guild Wars 2 finally released, a fair amount of people who loved the original Guild Wars didn't enjoy Guild Wars 2, and for good reason. Guild Wars 2 is very distinct from the original game, so people who are very passionate about the gameplay style and systems of Guild Wars will prefer Guild Wars over Guild Wars 2. But Guild Wars 2 wasn't only just different from its predecessor, it was different than every other MMO that was out at the time. A big trend you saw in gaming at the time was a result of World of Warcraft's success, where so many MMOs that were releasing in the late 2000s and early 2010s were trying to copy-paste World of Warcraft's formula into their own game to try to mimic the success of World of Warcraft. And a common trend you saw was that these MMOs just didn't do too well. Everyone always joked about the idea of each new MMO being the WoW killer, but the game never achieving anywhere near the amount of popularity. I'll mention the idea of killing a game to be kind of a stupid idea, but I'll leave that be. But one MMO that released during that time that decided to take a completely different approach was Guild Wars 2. Instead of trying to mimic the success of World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2 set out to be a unique game in its own right, taking the broad idea of MMORPGs, aka being an online game with characters and fantasy vibes and exploration, and stuff alongside some of the more intricate systems that we see in different MMOs, like instance dungeons, but with everything unique to itself. The event system is an idea that Guild Wars 2 took and ran with and incorporated fully into their game across the entire game. Not many games in general were doing anything like how events were done in Guild Wars 2, but it was successful. So successful in fact, World of Warcraft started incorporating their version of Guild Wars 2's events less than 2 years later and still do to this day. Stuff like that is what makes so many people who love Guild Wars or Guild Wars 2 love those games. They're fun, unique, and special in their own ways. There are lots of MMORPGs out there, but Guild Wars is the only game like Guild Wars, and Guild Wars 2 is the only game like Guild Wars 2. To continue, one of the biggest aspects of Guild Wars 2 on a philosophical level is the idea of freedom of movement. Guild Wars 2 has a very high skill ceiling when it comes to a player's ability to navigate the world. There are so many small intricacies to every different part of Guild Wars 2's movement that just makes the game very interesting, but also makes everything flow together very nicely once you get a hang of things. And that itself is something that was really new for MMOs at the time, as well as is to this day still not something that is the most common thing to see in MMOs. An aspect of this that is probably the single biggest example of this entire idea of the Guild Wars franchise being revolutionary is the mount system that was introduced with Path of Fire. Mounts in Guild Wars 2 are incredible. They are generally considered to be the best mounts in the entire genre and one of the best in all of gaming. The way mounts move, feel, interact with the player, can interact with each other, or sometimes puzzle elements, have thousands of little details, and so many other things just makes the entire system incredible. And more importantly, in the context of this video, revolutionary compared to anything that came before it, and honestly, still to this point, anything that has come since. The biggest copy of the system that we've seen thus far is with Skywriting and World of Warcraft, which a fair amount of people don't particularly enjoy the clunkiness of that system in comparison to the fluidity of Guild Wars 2's, but still much nicer than what existed before. So in general, ArenaNet can be summarized as a company who is never afraid to take chances. With both Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, the games have released as outliers within the MMORPG genre and have succeeded because of that. And throughout the lifespan of each game, ArenaNet still takes chances with experimenting with different ideas, trying out new systems, and trying to invent new mechanics and new types of content. So when it comes to Guild Wars 3, we can safely say that it will be a game that is completely unique compared to Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2. Just like how those games are the only games like them, Guild Wars 3 will be the only game like Guild Wars 3 and maybe more important, Guild Wars 3 will be a stark example against all of the current MMOs we see and stand out from them in massive ways, likely to great success, just like the first two games. Next, I want to talk a bit more on a meta level about the MMO genre as a whole. I'm somebody who's played a variety of MMOs throughout my life and have actively been playing a few within the last couple of months, and the big trend by people who love MMOs right now is that the genre feels very stagnant and just old in general. The most popular MMOs, at least for people who live in the United States, currently are World of Warcraft, which released in 2004, Final Fantasy XIV, which relaunched in 2013, Guild Wars 2, which released in 2012, and Elder Scrolls Online, which released in 2014. The youngest of those games is 12 years old, and while all of them are relatively good games and are popular for a reason, and while all of them have gotten many updates over their life that raises the quality of each game, at each game's core is the overall design and foundational systems that were present when each game released. So the most popular MMOs are the same ones that have been the most popular for over a decade now. As far as recent MMO releases go, we can see a range of games that at the best were just lackluster and never gained a lot of steam, to ones that immediately crashed and burned and basically didn't even get out of the door. Where Winds Meet is a recent game that some people debate whether or not it is an MMO, but for the sake of highlighting it, generally has been successful in its short lifespan so far. Going down a rung, New World was a game that had a fair amount of hype before its release and had a pretty sizable population with a dedicated community. But the game as a whole had a variety of issues and just never really picked up a lot of steam and is now currently in the shutdown process. And then going all the way down to below the ladder, I really hate using Dead on Arrival as a description for games because it is often massively incorrectly used, but for all intents and purposes, Ashes of Creation is a game that was instantly dead on arrival after being pretty hyped up beforehand, where basically the entire studio collapsed right as the game entered early access, to the point that most people think the entire project was a massive scam. So while the most popular MMOs are just getting older and older, no new MMOs have really breached into the space, and it can be really difficult to do. MMOs are massive games that require a decently large, active population right as the game launches, and forevermore to stay sustainable. There's a huge risk for something that is such a big ask that most game companies don't even want to think about making an MMO because it's a financially difficult decision. But some studios are still giving it a shot, and ArenaNet is doing it again. So in an environment where people are desperate for a new, good, and popular MMO, Guild Wars 3 has a massive opportunity to really swoop in and be the biggest MMO to have released in a very long time. Next, I want to return to the idea of Guild Wars 2, and Guild Wars 3 coexisting. A lot of people have had concerns about Guild Wars 2 being a healthy game with the release of Guild Wars 3, and I think there are just a lot of interesting ideas. First and foremost, Guild Wars has been healthy and decently popular since the final major update prior to Guild Wars 2, all the way until the most recent return to the game with Reforged. ArenaNet put Guild Wars in a good space to exist, kept the servers running, and let the community continue enjoying the game that they love. At a bare minimum level, Guild Wars 2 will be exactly like that. People will still play the game, you will still be able to complete all the content like meta events, most of which can easily be done with a small group of people already, and all single player content will obviously be accessible as the Guild Wars 2 servers will remain up. But that's the bare minimum, and I think that's a foolish thing to expect, especially with ArenaNet's new official commitment to Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, where they have recently expressed an amount of regret with not continuing major updates for the original Guild Wars until more recently, and they are committed to continuing the development cycle of the original Guild Wars. Similarly, they are committed to maintaining the development cycle of Guild Wars 2 and to keep pushing out new content to the game forevermore. And of course, as Guild Wars 3 releases, they will continue committing to that game and expanding upon that game in the future. And honestly, I think this entire idea is unprecedented. To have a game studio release an MMO and maintain it is a big thing, especially on the scale of what we see a game like Guild Wars 2 to be, but to do it with not one, not two, but 3 massive MMOs is absolutely insane. It makes ArenaNet feel like the biggest MMO studio to have ever existed, even if each game individually is not necessarily as popular as, say, World of Warcraft. And as somebody who loves both Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, and as somebody who is super excited for Guild Wars 3, this is honestly the best case scenario for anyone who loves the Guild Wars franchise, but there is an important idea with maintaining all 3 games at the same time, and that is how each game is so incredibly unique from one another, meaning each game is specifically catering to very specific audiences of people who enjoy MMORPGs, meaning that each game has its own distinct place in the MMORPG genre. You may be someone who only likes the original Guild Wars for all the different things that that game provides, and that is obviously completely okay. It is great that Guild Wars is there for you, just like how Guild Wars 2 caters to a very specific audience, just like how Guild Wars 3 will cater to a very specific audience, and that combination of cohesion but uniqueness is just something so beautiful to see and just puts ArenaNet into a very unique position to essentially have the ability to dominate a large portion of the entire MMORPG genre by catering to 3 niches of the genre at the same time. And of course, on top of all that, for anyone who likes the Guild Wars franchise as a whole, or maybe likes each game individually because you like a wide variety of games, you are going to be feasting. Lastly, I want to dive into a really silly idea, and I will say that some people will probably think this is stupid to talk about in the current moment, and this is likely the only time I will ever talk about this for maybe a decade. But I want to discuss Guild Wars 4. Yes, Guild Wars 3 hasn't even released yet, but Guild Wars 4 is still an interesting idea. I mean, we may as well talk about Guild Wars 7 while we're at it, but genuinely, the idea of Guild Wars 3 is making me feel a little excited about the idea of Guild Wars 4 in like 15 years, or however many years, for 2 reasons. The first reason is that we see all the first 3 games as incredibly unique and genre-defining, revolutionary games that perfectly cater to a specific niche. We can expect Guild Wars 4 to be like that. It will be new, unique, and nothing like the first 3 games. It may be a game that the MMORPG community needs at its time, and it may be a game that pushes the entire genre forward. And to that end, 40-something-year-old me cannot wait to dive into the teria of that game. Oh god, I'll be 40 in 14 years. But the other reason is what Guild Wars 3 is doing for Guild Wars 4 when it comes to world building, and more importantly, what Guild Wars 2 will continue doing. Guild Wars 3 is a prequel to the entire Guild Wars franchise, set after Grinth's rise and before the Exodus of the Gods, that will allow us to explore a very unique part of Tyrian history that has so much potential for cool storytelling that I will save the speculation of for other videos. But more importantly, as a prequel, it will provide so much world building for the world of Tyria and for the Guild Wars franchise, hopefully adding so much more depth and flavor to the history of the world, expanding it in unique ways, all while constricting ideas in meaningful ways. That would be really cool for just adding more depth to both Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, but will also help set up the foundational concepts of the lore that would be present from the get-go in a future Guild Wars 4, with the assumption that Guild Wars 4 would potentially be a sequel to Guild Wars 2 as Tyria moves forward. Additionally, Guild Wars 3 will have a lengthy life cycle as well, hopefully with a plethora of expansions and stories that will unfold. While we experience that game and all of the lore and story present within, Guild Wars 2 will still be chugging along with all the new content that will be added to the game during Guild Wars 3's lifespan. While Guild Wars 3 will be adding so much depth to Tyria and helping set up Guild Wars 4, Guild Wars 2 will be doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. There is the potential that, once again, with the assumption that Guild Wars 4 is a sequel to Guild Wars 2, that we will see the entirety of Guild Wars 3's life cycle, the entirety of Guild Wars 2's past and future, and maybe the entirety of Guild Wars 1's future content, all working to set up the release of Guild Wars 4 in the future. And if that ends up being the case, that is insane and will maybe make Guild Wars 4 one of the coolest games of all time if this is all done correctly. But of course, the idea of Guild Wars 4 is not really even something we can think about at this current point, or for a very long time, but it's just another aspect that can suggest that Guild Wars 3 is going to be a huge deal. And that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. In a world of doom and gloom and people complaining about everything at every opportunity, I always like to be someone who is optimistic and excited for the future. Obviously, we will only ever know any of this once we can fully experience Guild Wars 3 or anything else that I talked about in this video. We will have to just wait and see. I hope you all enjoyed watching, and I hope you all are taking great care of yourselves. Have a good one, everyone.